John Lee Dumas. Today, guys, one of the most incredible podcasters I know. Super humbled that he jumped on with us today. 1,400 plus entrepreneurs interviewed, and of course, a million plus downloads every single month. Guys, this is the Digital Agency Hacker Podcast. Everything you need to know to grow and scale a sustainable and thriving agency. So without any further ado, let's jump right into a conversation I had last week with JLD.
Well, man, JLD, I truly appreciate, man, you being on the show and giving up your time. You're going on vacation here pretty soon, right? Where are you headed?
JC, I am headed to the state of Maine, which the motto for that state, by the way, is the way life should be. I spent the first 18 years of my life there. Okay. Loved it. It's idyllic. But you being in Nicaragua and me being in Puerto Rico, man, you will never get me to spend another winter north of Florida ever again.
Dude, we went up to northern Nicaragua the other day and it was 70. And I was like in a jacket, wool coat, like I was strapped in, you know? It's crazy. So here's some of the thoughts that I want to jump off, right? So you're known as this podcaster. I looked at a video the other day and you were so excited. You had this big smile on your face. 2014, you hit 600,000 downloads in a month.
Yeah.
Right? What are you at right now with your podcast?
So now we're over 1.1 million listens every single month. We've just published our 2,643rd episode.
Now, all of this time, I think one of the biggest blessings, right? It's not really that I'm talking to you and learning from JLD. You might be a really smart guy, but really I'm learning from these thousands of other people out there, right? So looking back from both like the celebrity superstars that you've interviewed, and there's been countless of them, all the way to the just fire entrepreneurs that are killing it. What are some of the stories that you've taken away over the last couple of years? Maybe one or two that stick out. I was like, man, that one changed my mindset or changed the ball game.
Yeah, to your point, I'm always, as the host, just the conduit of information. Like my job is to take a spotlight and shine it on my guests. I mean, the last thing that my listeners need is to hear me ramble on about something that's happened in my life for like the 74th time that they've heard. And, quick side note, like there are so many pretty well-known entrepreneurs and interviewers specifically, that will do that. And I just like want to be like, my friends, like when I am like tuning into your show where you're interviewing Noah Kagan, like I want to listen to Noah Kagan. Like that's why I'm tuning into the show. And when you spend 70% of the time talking, like there's an issue there, like, because I've heard your stories. I know who you are. And I think that's so important for interviewers to really get is you're the conduit. You're supposed to ask the questions, dive deeper, clarify things. Like when I say something smart, which might happen at most one time today, like hopefully you grab onto that and like clarify it and really make sure your audience and your listeners get that. But you're just turning that spotlight onto your guests so that your listeners can get value from that. And so after that little tirade right there, for me, one of the earlier and more impactful messages that I just really took away from one of my guests was a guy by the name of Aaron Walker. And I interviewed him and he's become a great friend to this day. But he said this phrase that just really stuck with me at the beginning of the interview. And we really like dove deep into what it meant and the meaning behind it. And then and that whole phrase and concept that we were talking about was going from success to significance. And to me, that was really powerful because at that time, it was probably around the 2014 timeframe, I was achieving a lot of success. I mean, I was running a 7-figure business back then. I'm in my 7th year right now of running a multi-million-dollar a year business. So I had success financially. You mentioned the numbers. We were getting over 600,000 downloads at the time. So the business itself, the podcast was a success and growing. And a lot of other things were really working. So I was definitely a success in a lot of things. But at the same time, it was like, is that enough? Because, here I am. I know that I want to keep doing this for years and years and years. And here you and I are talking 6 years later. And luckily, I'm still doing this. I needed to figure out how to add significance to what I was doing beyond just success. Like, there had to be more. So that kind of did set me on a journey pretty early on to seek out what that significance would look like. And it's really had a big impact on my life.
That's powerful. Of all of these, the guys that you've chatted with, and even in your own journey through the success, I think a big thing right now through the works is like the mental game, right? And what are your commitments, breathing, you know, all these different things. I graduated with a 2.0 GPA in college, you know, not worth it. What are your thoughts on specifically when it comes to, okay, I've learned this trade, I'm working my butt off, I'm figuring out, I'm getting in the mud, I'm crazy, or man, I was just gifted with this talent, or I was placed in the right place. Work ethic versus, I don't know, gifts or talents or so on and so forth.
I'm a big believer in the quote that every master was a disaster, straight up disaster. Like anybody who you look at and you're like, oh my God, they're such a great interviewer, they're such a great basketball player, they're such a great writer, or they're such a great, you know, anything.
Yeah.
They were a disaster at that thing when they first started, because that's the evolution of what it is to become a human being. It's like when we were born, we were a disaster at talking. We couldn't do it. We couldn't walk. We couldn't crawl. We couldn't, you know, drive a car. But like, what do? Over time, you know, we learned things, we practiced things, we practiced some more, and then we became, you know, not necessarily a master for all things or for anything for some people, but at least we became competent at a lot of things. And for those people who you look at and they became masters, it's going back to that 10,000 hour rule. Like those people have put in 10,000, 20,000, you know, in some cases of Olympic athletes, it's like hundreds of thousands of hours for like a 9-second event, which is just, you know, mind blowing. And it's just so crazy to think about, but that's what it takes. And that's what they've done. And so for me, like back in 2012, when I was going to launch Entrepreneurs on Fire, I'm like, I'm going to be a disaster as an interviewer. I'm going to be bad, awkward, inexperienced, naive. And I was all of those things. But I said to myself, well, if I just do what everybody else is doing and I do 1 interview per week, that means I'm going to be doing 4 interviews per month. Like, how am I ever going to be good doing something 4 days per month, or just even 4 times per month? Because these were 30-minute interviews. So I'm like 2 hours a month. Like I'm doing, you know, at what supposedly is going to become my craft. I'm like, it's not going to, you know, carve a champion out by any stretch of the imagination. So that's when I said, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go all in. And to be frank, that's kind of been the story of my life, is like, I'm either going to go all in or not at all. Like I can be super lazy. Like I'm a super lazy person when I want to be, because I'm like, I'm either going to go and meticulously mow my lawn and do all of my landscaping, so it's going to be perfect, or I'm literally not going to do it at all. And of course I choose the latter, and I pay somebody to do it because I'm lazy enough to know I'm never going to do my own landscaping. Like it's just not going to happen. And if I wasn't able to afford that, then I would just have crappy grass and weeds everywhere. And that's just simply okay. So I was committed to becoming amazing at my craft, doing it every single day, getting a little bit better every single time. And you know, that really harkens back to a great book that I read by Jeff Olson that's called The Slight Edge, which is just all about getting one tiny minuscule percentage better, but every single day, over and over and over again, until boom, you're finally able to cross that bridge. And for me, honestly, I look back, it was episode 480. Like that number's etched in my mind. Like that's when I stopped recording this episode with the guy I was interviewing, or the woman. And I looked down and I was like, that felt amazing. I felt for the first time in my life like I was actually good at what I was doing. And that was 480 episodes. That was 1.5 years of doing it every single day. Like that to me is what was critical. And I feel like people can take what I was able to do in the podcasting world of just going all in and doing it every single day, 7 days a week, and just being the only person that was able and willing to do that, and find that underserved niche that's in your market that you can do as well. Because when my mentor, my mastermind leader looked at me and said, John, there's a reason why people don't do 7-day-a-week podcasts. It can't be done. And I said, well, wait a second. If the top people in the industry are telling me that it can't be done, and I find a way to do it, there's opportunity there.
That's huge. So I work a lot with the digital agency world. That's most of people who's going to be listening to this podcast, right? And I hear a lot of 4-hour work week, outsource everything. And it's almost counterintuitive what I hear you saying, maybe, right? So I want to clarify, right? Because what I hear and when I think of a podcast every day, I try to do one a week. It takes a lot of work. I cannot imagine how much work you're putting in, but you can't do that in 4 hours a work week, right? So how do you feel about, or do you even see that of our culture, my generation especially, this, you know, they're chasing after the free life and all of this, or free life, freedom, so on and so forth. Is there a counter, like, is it countering each other, or how did you balance that? Or do you balance that? What do you think?
Well, first I want to address this 4-hour work week thing, because it's a hugely misconstrued and misunderstood saying. Like, everybody loves to say 4-hour work week because Tim Ferriss back in 2008 wrote a book called 4-Hour Work Week that for the past 12 years now, everybody has misunderstood. It's not how can you work 4 hours a week? It's how can you take your 40 hours of work that you're doing every week, come up with systems and processes and build a team to compress those 40 hours down into 4, and then use those 36 hours or 50 hours or 31 hours, whatever it is you want to add in additional to that, to work on other parts of your business. And so that is what has really set me apart, is that when my mentor told me, hey, you can't do a daily podcast because it's just too much work and time, you'll never be able to do anything else. I said, well, what if I figure out how to do a daily podcast 1 day per week? And I figured out exactly how to do that. Every Tuesday for 5.5 years, I recorded 8 episodes back to back, which, by the way, that's a lot of work. And that was exhausting and tiring. And I didn't always feel like doing it, but it was 1 day a week. And so I got up and that was my Super Bowl. Does Tom Brady get up every single Sunday wanting to play a football game? Probably not, but it's his one Sunday a week. He gets up and he goes and he plays because he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, period. So for me, that was it. I was like, that's my one day. If I want to, you know, be a loser tomorrow and lay on the couch and watch Netflix all day, I will. And I did sometimes the following day on Wednesday to recoup, to recover, to rest. Cause that's a big part of, you know, being an entrepreneur is, you know, not getting burned out. Like, that's a game you have to play. How can I push it? But at the same time, when I get into the red and I start revving too much, how do I ease off the gas pedal to make sure that, you know, my body's able to handle the long game? Because this isn't a short game. This is the long game. And so for me, being able to figure out how to compress what most people, you know, were taking to do 1 episode and compressing it and doing 8 episodes in 1 day, like, that allowed me for 5.5 years, that's 2,000 days, to release a daily episode. But again, only working 4 days per month on the actual podcast recordings themselves. That's just 4 days per month. The other 28, 27 days per month, I'm doing other things in my business. I'm working on joint ventures, webinars, products, courses, or I'm doing nothing. I'm literally relaxing and hanging out. And like, that's the big key to that, you know, quote unquote 4-hour work week kind of mentality.
That's powerful. If you had to nail down the actual hours, especially in the beginning, because it's different, right? Like, I mean, now you've been doing this years, you got into a rhythm, you figured out all the things that you didn't know, you know, 5 years ago. How many hours a week were you working back in the day when you first got started on this journey?
I'd say you could probably very safely make the statement that every week I was working in somewhere in the range of 40 to 60 hours. There were weeks where I'd be pushing 60 hours because of various things. And there'd be weeks where I'd be, you know, closer down to 40 hours per week. And it was much more of a what needs to get done this week than, okay, this is going to be my set schedule. Because, you know, for years I was in the Army and corporate finance and, you know, I had a set schedule. I knew what that looked like. And that wasn't my life as an entrepreneur. So it was a fluctuating scale, but I would say that 90% of my weeks fell into that 20-hour period of between 40 to 60.
I love it. That's awesome, man. Because I think that's a big thing that we mess up on. Like, we see these freedom jobs, podcasting, digital marketing, you know, the nomadic agency nowadays. And we just think the 4 hours, you just think the 20 hours, so on and so forth. And for me, like 40 to 60 hours is like the norm.
It's the norm.
Next big thing is the fear. I heard you talking about this on a podcast not too long ago. When you first got started, like, we're thinking back, right? You were in the military, very obviously chaotic. I know you fought in Iraq, chaotic world, but very disciplined, very scheduled, very much routine, right? And then going into this entrepreneurial, crazy, you don't even know what to do. Talk to me a little bit about that fear and what made you finally decide to jump, because I think that's it's a big focus point of a lot of people.
For me, it really came down to perspective. Perspective was huge because yes, I was scared at basically every single step of my entrepreneurial journey. Like I was scared to leave my quote unquote full-time safe job, which now where we're sitting, commercial real estate, I mean, it's devastated, do we ever think that was a safe job? Of course it was during a certain amount of time. But now, that world has been flipped upside down and, people are absolutely scrambling. So I was scared to leave that quote unquote safe job. Then I was scared to, even attempt to learn what it was like to become an interviewer or a host. I was scared to reach out to my mentor. I was scared to reach out to the first guest that I had to interview. I was scared to actually interview them. I was scared to publish those interviews. Like every single one of those steps. Like I was scared, I was nervous, I had anxiety, I had that imposter syndrome at every single one of those steps. But at the end of the day, like two big things did help. And I mentioned one, which was perspective. Like perspective really helped. I just kept saying to myself, bro, you're not getting shot at. Like you're no longer in Iraq, during your 13-month tour of duty where people are shooting at you, mortar rounds are falling left and right. Like you are literally facing life and death situations, on a weekly, if not sometimes daily basis. Like, so get a grip. Like you're sitting in front of a computer at your home in San Diego, California, which is like paradise. Like get over yourself and just do this. Come on. Like what's the worst thing that's happening in the world? I mean, there are buildings that are blowing up in Beirut. There are, millions of people starving to death around the world and debilitating diseases. So like, all of those things are terrible things, but you can use them to like keep things in perspective on like, what am I so scared about? Like nothing that I'm doing is like nearly as difficult or tough as something that people are facing every single day. And the fact and things that I've faced personally myself in the past that I've gotten through. And so just kind of recognizing and having that perspective was really, really key. And then the big thing is just saying, hey, listen, I know that I'm the average of the 5 people I surround myself with or that I spend the most time with. So I'm going to surround myself with amazing people. I invested significant money and I joined a mastermind of other awesome people. I invested money and I hired a mentor who was an amazing person who was like, just crushing it in a place that I wanted to be crushing it in. So now all of a sudden, a lot of my days are being taken up surrounded by other awesome people who, by the way, are having doubts and fears and anxiety and stress, but together we're supporting ourselves. Like if I literally like told you that you had to like go to like a creepy cemetery by yourself and like go and like walk through it at midnight, like you'd be freaked out. It'd be impossible not to be. It doesn't matter how brave you are or whatever. But if you're just doing it with just 1, 2, or 5 other people, it's a completely different ballgame. Now you're just kind of like, all right, let's make an adventure out of this. Because, I'm with other people and it's just like, I don't know, me is still a little freaky in some areas, but it's just a completely different kind of experience. And like, that was my journey, was let me make sure that there's people with me as I'm going through this journey.
That's awesome, man. I got one final question for you. So I'm big on commitments. What are you committed to? Like, what are you willing to fight for? Right. So, I mean, military, right? You were willing to go fight for something that you believed in, right? But now as an entrepreneur, there's certain things that I think get us through life, right? Like that we're willing to wake up early in the morning. We're willing to get on crazy podcasts we don't really want to, or whatever. Right now, at this time in your life, what are you committed to? You hinted at it at the beginning, I think a little bit, but what's your purpose right now?
So what I'm committed to right now is what I refer to as the ripple effect, because I've seen it in action now for 8 years and it just blows me away every single time. And for me, that ripple effect is that like right now, as you and I are speaking, somebody's listening to episode 287 of Entrepreneurs on Fire that I recorded 8 years ago, but something during that interview that they're listening to is inspiring them. And they're now going to go off and do something that they might otherwise have never done. And that thing that they're going to do is going to potentially improve their life and those around them, but also now they might inspire one person who is not otherwise going to have been inspired because of that first step that was just taken by that initial person that just listened to my podcast episode. And even, a different way to look at it is a person listening or watching to this right now. Like that person that's never heard of John Lee Dumas, that's never heard of Entrepreneurs on Fire, or maybe they have, but some question that you asked elicited an answer from me that I've never said before, or I said in a different way, or I said it at a different time in their lives that was just the right timing for them. And now, boom, they're going off and doing something amazing. And now there's like this second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth degrees of separation where something that you and I did today, 5 years from now, might, have this resounding impact with one person that goes off and does something insane that they might otherwise not have done. And then that ripple effect just continues off throughout the world. So now that I put out over 2,600 episodes on my show, been a guest on over 1,000 other podcasts and counting. That's one thing that I do is every month I have one day where I'm just booked out 20 episodes on other podcasts. They're only 15 minutes long and I'm back to back to back. So you're getting a little bit of an exception today. I'll have to go back in the email chain and see why you got it, but I know there was a reason.
Appreciate it.
And I just knock it out because I know that I want to be on other people's podcasts and other people's shows and other people's platforms because of that ripple effect. It's, it doesn't directly lead to money in my pocket. It might, in a roundabout way at some point down the road, but I don't need that. And that's not why I do it. I do it because of what we just discussed. And to me, the ripple effect it's powerful.
The ripple effect. What ripple effect? And that can be negative or positive, right? So
absolutely
positive.
Like that poor little butterfly that just flaps its wings over in Nicaragua and starts a hurricane in Africa that comes and destroys Puerto Rico.
Right. Brother, I appreciate your time. I know how valuable it is. And guys, if you're listening, definitely head over to EOFire.com. Entrepreneur on Fire, one of my favorite podcasts. I think it's one of 10 that I make sure that I listen to constantly. So, and you could literally consume content for what? I don't know. Have you added it up? If I started playing, could I go a year and still be listening?
I mean, we could do the math real quick. We won't, but it'd be 2,600 times like an average of 30 minutes. So that could be whatever it is.
Crazy. So definitely head over to him, brother. I appreciate it and have a wonderful week.
Adios.